I'm excited, guys, because I'm putting a new roof rack on the 4Runner today. The folks at Sherpa Equipment Co. were kind enough to send me one of their Princeton roof racks for these 4th generation 4Runners. There's a few reasons why I chose the Sherpa over the other options out there. There's quite a few available, so we'll get into those reasons a little bit later on in this video once we get this installed. But for now, let's get this old rack ripped off and let's start jamming on this thing. The first order of business is to remove the 40-inch light bar that I have mounted on my factory roof rack because I want to be able to reuse that for the Sherpa rack, but more on that a little bit later on. To get the factory roof rack off, you want to start by prying off these plastic caps. There's one on each corner, and these just clip on, so you can just use like a plastic pry tool and just carefully pop them out of place. Try not to snap the little clips off, but it's kind of inevitable on a high mileage vehicle. Then you want to loosen off the bolts that hold the rack on. There's 2 on each corner, and you want to be careful. You want to try and do this like equally back and forth because you don't want the plate that's inside the roof to come loose, and if it does, you're going to end up having to rip your headliner out in order to fish it back out. In my case, I had a bit of a weird situation here because the bolts just kept on staying firm even as I was loosening them off, and one of my favorite parts about polishing paint jobs is learning the story behind what a vehicle has been through, and a similar kind of thing happened here. Judging by the scratches on the cross rails of my factory roof rack, I just assumed that they had mounted a canoe or something up there or a storage box or something, but it was all scratched up in the center. And then I noticed that the plastic caps had chips on them right where somebody would have been prying them off with a screwdriver. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that Toyota used regular hex bolts on this with red Loctite. I think they used Torx bolts, and I don't think that they would have used red permanent Loctite. But that's why the threads on these bolts were so firm even as they were loosened off, is they were covered with Loctite. So my theory is I think the previous owner of this 4Runner must have had trouble fitting it in her garage, and she had somebody remove the roof rack off of it for clearance and then put it back on before she sold it. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Once I had the rack off, I just used kind of a 2-step process to clean up where the caps used to be. I just used Optimum No Rinse on getting the dirt off, and then I wiped it down with G-Technic panel wipe. It's a little bit stronger than alcohol and water mixed together, but you do want to be a little bit careful with that. So I sprayed that directly on the rag and just tried to get as much of the adhesive off as I could. For starters, let's take a look at what we got in the box here. Comes in a pretty big box, obviously, because, you know, it's the length of the roof of the 4Runner. We got a whole bunch of cross rails here. And these come in 2 different boxes. We've got the side plates down here, and nice, neat and tidy package of, we've got our hardware. These are our mounting blocks and the brackets that it mounts to. We've also got the fairing here. And yeah, everything is just kind of neatly packaged. Looks like it's a fairly simple, straightforward installation. So we got some instructions here, it says, so let's dig into this and just see what it says. Sherpa also made a really good video on their channel about installing these Princeton roof racks on the 4th Gen 4Runners, so if you want more instructions, more of a how-to video, feel free to go check that out. On that note, if you're checking out other videos of theirs, these guys actually parked a Miata on top of one of their roof racks for a video, and it didn't really get very many views. I don't know why, but I feel like that should have gone viral. I'm going to link that video in the description of this one. Go check it out because I think these are rated for like to hold 400 pounds or something like that static, and they put a whole Miata up there and it held up fine. So this is definitely a very strong roof rack. Alright guys, I was actually wrong about the instructions. This is just a card that tells you to scan this code so you can find the instructions online. So you actually have 2 choices here. These are the instructions from the website, and then they also have an install video on their YouTube channel here you can check out as well. But it looks like really nicely detailed instructions, really well laid out, and with really good diagrams and stuff. So this is definitely not like building one of those made in China sheds in the backyard that I just did a couple weeks ago. These are actually easy to follow. Now, one thing I'm a little bit concerned about here is the 4Runner barely makes it in and out of this garage as it is. Once we're in here, we got lots of height in the ceiling, but this door, it just barely clears. I'm honestly not entirely sure if this is gonna clear with a new rack on it or not, so I'm just going for it. I'm gonna install it here in the garage. We'll see if it gets stranded in here or not, but I guess you have to just keep on watching and find out whether I'm taking this thing back off. All right, so we got a little bit of pre-assembly to do here before we start actually working on the truck. We're gonna put this fairing on one of the crossbars, and we're also going to be mounting these brackets, these mounting plates onto crossbars as well. So we do that first before we start actually putting things on the truck. Okay, we got our fairing attached to one of the crossbars here, as you can see. And we're gonna do this crossbar now. We're gonna put these mounting brackets on, and we're gonna start with the fronts, and these are very clearly labeled PTF for the front, and then the rears they have an R on them, so you can tell the difference. There's also a little bit of a kind of a notch on the one corner that always faces forward on this rack. So then there's no guesswork of which part goes where. So what we're gonna do is drop our T-nuts into the slots here and just line the bolts up. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and get the roof ready for the mounting brackets here. So we have two of these metal sleeves that goes over these plastic sleeves that are on the factory roof rack setup. So we're going to stick these on first. It's a little bit easier to do it this way instead of putting them inside the rubber right off the bat. Okay, so we got those in. Now these rubber pieces only go on one way. And it's a skinnier piece of rubber here compared to down here. This skinny part always faces the center of the vehicle. So you want to mount it this way and not this way with the skinny side towards the outer of the vehicle. You want to stick it on this way. You probably noticed that I'm only using hand tools when I'm installing this roof rack, and there's a pretty good reason for that. I'm just not comfortable using an impact gun or a drill or something on the bolts that I'm working on. Again, the plates in the roof, I don't want those to loosen off and break free. And then the Allen heads on the screws that I'm putting into the rack, they're so easy to strip, and I would rather feel what's going on and do it by hand than save a little bit of time and then just grind all this stuff in with a tool. I feel like that's a great way to strip the head of your bolts. It's a great way to lose the plates in your roof, and this just isn't one of those jobs where you can race through with power tools, I think. But, I mean, it's up to you. If you feel like you can do it without having any trouble, then by all means, go for it. Now, before we tighten these up all the way, you want to measure both sides to make sure that these crossbars are centered. So up front here, we're about 4 inches on this side, and then we're 4 inches on this side as well. So we know that's centered. We can tighten that down. Do the same for the rear as well. Alright, so we got these crossbars mounted and tightened up. They're measured, tightened, they're centered perfectly. So now it's a matter of putting the side plates on. Okay, we got these side plates up, and that was actually a lot easier than I was expecting. I think it definitely helps that these are aluminum and not steel, so you can just kind of hold them with one hand. And you want to leave these guys loose until you get it adjusted where you want it. And I found the best way is to follow the roof line with this line of the rack. You want to slide this so that it's even along this bend. And then once you have that, then you can crank these guys down. Okay, fairing is on, and initially I think I had it set a little bit too low. I'm kind of paranoid about wind noise with this setup. I don't know, apparently this rack is really good for wind noise, but so I had it a little bit too close to the roof, but Sherpa recommends starting with having this kind of flush with the bottom of the side plate, and then adjusting if I do have wind noise, kind of adjusting up or down from there. So now it's just a matter of putting the remaining crossbars all the way across the whole roof now, and I think we're done. I'm gonna double check, do a bolt check, and make sure everything is tight. But yeah, this rack is fitting great. Looking good. All right, well, we're pretty much done. I got all the crossbars on, and I got them as evenly spaced as I could. It took a little while to try and get them placed where I want them, but I think I'm happy with how it is now. So now it's just a matter of going through and tightening all of these screws on each side. All right, well, it's tomorrow, and I actually ended up getting the rack finished yesterday in time, but I still need to mount the light bar up here, and unfortunately I don't have enough T-nuts to do that. I only need 2 of them. Like, Sherpa will sell extra ones and all the individual components for these racks on their website, but I mean, to wait for them to ship all the way from Colorado and come through the border and stuff just doesn't really make sense. So I'm gonna try and find them locally. I think I'm gonna go and head over to Fastenal and hope that I can just buy a handful of them. It's one thing I kind of wish they did more of. I wish they included a little bit of extra hardware, like some of the things that you buy that when there's like small little nuts and bolts and stuff, they give you extras just because they know you're gonna drop them and lose them and stuff. It would have been nice to have a couple extra T-nuts just because that is kind of a specific thing to this rack for mounting a lot of stuff on it. But yeah, we'll hop in the Tacoma and hopefully find some T-nuts. Let's get this light bar mounted, and then I'm finally gonna pull this thing out of the garage and we'll find out if it's actually gonna fit through the doorway or not. All right, and the Tacoma has a check engine light on it. That's awesome. But it's a Toyota, so as long as it's not flashing, you can drive it anyways. I'll figure that out when we get home. Little update here. So I went and got some gas and the check engine light went out. So my wife has a theory that the gas gauge on this thing is not working because she's run out of gas and it still showed a quarter tank before. I think that there's reason to believe that that might be true because it seems like when I fill this all the way up to the F, and then I drive a certain amount, the gauge will go down accordingly. Like it seems to be operating properly, but it never goes below a quarter tank. And it almost seems like when it hits a quarter tank, the check engine light comes on. And when I fill it with some gas, it goes away. So anyways, I'm gonna check the code here. I'm using my trusty fixed app here. Looks like P0606. ECM processor error. Well, let's clear it and see if it comes back. I don't know. I'm going to keep an eye on this and just see if every time I get low on gas, if that code pops up, then maybe that shows that there's a bad sending unit or something on the fuel tank. I don't know. Well, that was a colossal waste of time. I think that the nuts that I got were going to work too. These are pretty close to the T-nuts that Sherpa gives you. $3.40. I thought it was going to be great. Good to go. I tried to take this mount, like this bracket, off of my light bar so that I'd be able to tighten up the head of the Allen bolt before putting this on. Anyways, long story short, the bolt snapped off and this is stuck in there. It's not worth my time. I mean, this light, as you can see, it's getting kind of corroded on the ends. It works fine, but it's, I don't know, it's not worth my time. So I ended up just unwiring the light that goes to the roof for now. And I'll have to order a new one. I'm just gonna, I don't know, I'm kind of thinking about redoing the wiring setup on this thing anyways. Like, it's kind of a rat's nest at the battery here with the 2 different lights mounted to it. And now with the new rack, we have other options for We could do like some camping lights on the side here, or I like the idea of maybe doing some chase lights on the back, some amber ones. And if that's the case, I don't want to keep on wiring things directly to the battery, so I might get one of those aftermarket fuse blocks or something like that. But that, I guess, will be a story for another video. I guess without further ado, let's find out if this 4runner is trapped in my garage or not. Let's see if it'll fit out the door. So why did I end up going with the Sherpa rack in the first place? Well, for starters, their reputation is pretty awesome. I was in one of the many 4th Gen 4runner Facebook groups the other day. Somebody asked for the best roof rack for the 4runners, and it was like comment after comment. Everybody kept saying Sherpa over and over again. So they've definitely earned a good reputation in the community. Another big one for me is the way that it mounts. So it reuses all of the factory mounting points, which means no drilling, no silicone, no water leaks, none of that. The way that this rack mounts to the truck is a big part of why people prefer this Sherpa rack for the 4runner. I've also seen with some other roof rack manufacturers the front fairing, it's needed a little bit more for structural support, I guess, and you have to run it pretty tight to the paint of the roof, and in some cases it actually even rubs through the paint. On this rack, it's nowhere even near the roof of the truck, so you don't have to worry about any paint rubbing issues. Another big benefit is that this rack is all aluminum. So first of all, it's made in America. These are being built in Colorado, and they're all aluminum. So they're a lot lighter than the steel counterparts. And on top of that, they're not painted, so you don't have to worry about the paint flaking off or something over time. These are powder coated, which is a much more durable finish. If you're not familiar, it's actually baked onto the surface. So between being aluminum, not having to worry about rust, and not having to worry about the paint flaking off with the powder coat, the build quality of these is really beefy, and I think these racks are going to last a really long time on your rig. Also, I tested it out today, and the sunroof is fully operational. So you can tilt it forward, and you can also, obviously you can pull it, slide it in and out. That's not going to be an issue, but the tilt is a big thing, and it doesn't come into contact with any of the crossbars, which is pretty awesome because I actually do use my sunroof quite a bit. Aside from that, I just love the low profile look. I measured before and after, like the height of the stock rack, and then in the same spot, the height of the new one. And it's maybe an inch and a quarter taller than the stock rack, it looks like to me. But for what it is, I think that's about as good as you're gonna get. It really follows the contour of the roof line really well. Yeah, aside from that, it's low profile and is lightweight. It's aluminum. I put the side plates up myself just by holding them with one hand and putting the screw in. I didn't even have a helper or anything. I installed the entire rack all by myself. Nobody was out here helping me. And you can't say that about some of the other racks out there, that's for sure. So obviously, I mean, I'm trying to get the 4runners set up more for camping and overlanding, if I want to be cool and use that term. So it's pretty obvious that a rooftop tent would be a good next step. Also, I'm gonna have to get the light bar situation figured out, but I'm actually kind of excited about that. I think this is a good opportunity to maybe switch it up a little bit. Yeah, aside from the tent, let me know in the comments down below what you think I should be mounting to this thing, like gas cans, max tracks, all the cool stuff people put on these. What do you think is the most useful accessory that you can mount to a roof rack? Let's put it that way. And comment below, let me know what you got. The only other thing I got for you guys is I had an idea. I want to try doing a new type of video. I'm thinking we're gonna call it Roast My Runner. And I want you guys to send in your Toyota 4runners to me. And eventually I'm gonna gather them all up and I'm gonna make a video. It's gonna be all in good fun, but I'm gonna frickin' roast them. And it's, if you wanna know my opinion about what you've done with your 4runner, what I think is cool, what I think is not cool, keep in mind I have raptor lights on mine, so I'm already clearly an idiot. Head down in the description, and if you have a 4runner that you wanna know my opinion of, then send it over to me, and we'll get into doing that and see how that video does. If people really like it, then maybe we'll do it on Tacomas or other cars, or just keep doing 4runners all the time. I don't know. Anyways, thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you do the usual, and I will catch you guys in the next one. See you.